A 1992 book written by ex-CIA agent John Coleman is gaining renewed attention as its predictions about a post-industrial world controlled by globalist technocrats appears to be coming true. In the book, titled The Conspirators' Hierarchy, The Committee of 300, Coleman claims that an international committee led by the Bilderberg Group and Western intelligence agencies would steer the world towards a dystopian future in which 4 billion useless eaters would be eliminated by 2050 through limited wars, organized epidemics, and starvation. Today, the world is witnessing a limited war in Ukraine. An leaked memo from a US Air Force general warns that the US could be at war with China by 2025. The COVID-19 pandemic has also allowed authoritarian governments to impose mass lockdowns, global economic turmoil, and the expansion of authoritarian measures, all of which align with Coleman's predictions. Other predictions from the book include the promotion of compulsory pornography in schools, the destruction of industry and nuclear energy, the control of agriculture and food production by the Committee of 300, and a push for green energy that cannot sustain current energy demands. Does any of that sound familiar? In 2023, the liberal media is obsessed with promoting drag queens in schools. Agriculture and food production has been taken over by the globalist elite, with Bill Gates becoming America's biggest farmland owner, and the Dutch government forcing farmers off their land in order to comply with the crippling World Economic Forum green energy targets. The results have been tragic, with food shortages and spiraling energy prices punishing ordinary people. According to Coleman's 1992 book, these current events are not a coincidence, but are part of a decades-long plan to bring about a neo-feudalistic post-industrial society. Pointing out the hypocrisy of the elite never seems to make a dent or have any impact whatsoever on them. Why? Because they have no shame. They have no shame because they have no moral compass. They have no moral compass because they live according to the rule of the ends justifies the means. This precept infests every fibre of their ideology, from elections to open borders and climate change, abortion, you name it. This power-hungry cabal of billionaires and politicians has long plotted to enslave the masses, and now they're making their move. And they are determined to continue pulling the wool over your eyes. The World Economic Forum recently announced that it has recruited hundreds of thousands of information warriors to control the internet and police social media and forums for misinformation and conspiracy content which they will then shut down. According to Klaus Schwab's WEF, misinformation on the internet is an infodemic that is potentially deadly and requires a cure. The definition of misinformation, according to the WEF, is anything they disagree with. This means the information warriors will essentially be engaged in the act of shutting down dissent. Conspiracy forums and YouTube comment sections are being targeted by so-called digital first responders who pretend to be ordinary users of the platform but are actually working to disrupt proceedings and support the ideology of Klaus Schwab's WEF. Announcing the news on a WEF podcast, UN Communications Director Melissa Fleming said,
"So far we've recruited 110,000 information volunteers. And we equip these information volunteers with the kind of knowledge about how misinformation spreads and ask them to serve as kind of digital first responders in those spaces where misinformation travels."
The WEF are subliminally influencing the masses in order to push their narratives onto the people. Also on the podcast, mainstream journalist Mark Little set out potential solutions to the so-called infodemic. Little has worked for Twitter and he founded Storyful, a social media news agency closely linked to the fact-checking program. He has now launched Kinzen, a company which is threatening to use artificial intelligence to censor online content on behalf of the elites.
I've started to see very much the spread of misinformation as a global health crisis, because only when we think about misinformation in the same way we think about the spread of the coronavirus in a similar way, that misinformation is that serious a threat to our society. Misinformation now is happening within our friends and families. So we have to find strategies to, first of all, recognize it. And secondly, as active citizens, just like we wear masks to protect others, we need to be the good citizen, the active vector fighting back in our daily lives.
The World Economic Forum is not the only globalist organisation setting its sights on controlling the narrative on social media by unleashing hundreds of thousands of information warriors. Google's Jigsaw unit sponsors a RAND report that recommends infiltrating and subverting online conspiracy forums from within. According to the report, the best way to subvert conspiracy forums is by planting authoritative messaging wherever possible. So what is authoritative messaging? If you've spent any time on forums lately, you might have noticed that when an interesting or explosive topic is created, the thread is immediately swarmed by users leaving messages disparaging the original post, picking it apart and basically finding any possible way to cast doubt on its legitimacy. This type of behavior is an example of authoritative messaging and is performed by users who are engaging on behalf of the World Economic Forum or Google's Jigsaw unit. The report states that if authoritative messaging in the conspiracy forum is successful, so-called moderate conspiracy theorists will flip to become influencers and help guide the flock to greener pastures as brand ambassadors for the common good, teaching others the errors of their ways. The Google report goes on to claim that conspiracy forum members will eventually be persuaded by the bombardment of content flagged by algorithms, and they will slowly come around to believing that mainstream media and the fact checkers are right by the sheer volume of evidence and or peer pressure to conform. Judging by the content of this report, it's clear the elites don't have any respect for the intelligence and persistence of the average so-called conspiracy theorists. This is where they are getting it wrong. The average user of conspiracy forums in 2023 has already proven themselves by rejecting the all-encompassing fake news mainstream media, despite an endless barrage of propaganda and predictive programming. These are people who understand that all the world's a stage. These are people who are already battle-hardened. Trying to infiltrate conspiracy forums on social media and subvert certain members seems like a tactic that will be perceived as an intrusion that furthers the divide and leads to even less trust. Having said that, it's important we understand the nature of the information war being waged by the powers that be. We are part of something so huge right now. The elites would not be targeting conspiracy forums on social media in 2023 if these forums were not the last places on earth where truth is being discovered and lies are being exposed. We have the potential to break the chains of the past, the control, division, hatred, and separation. We are literally creating a new world. That's why the control apparatus is so afraid. They know that they can't stop this. The more they lie, the more they deceive, the more they expose themselves.